Welcome to Tell Your Story. My name is Kazima Wajahat, and I am a speech language pathologist, author, writer, and blogger. But I wasn't always all of those things. I spent the greater part of my adult life trying to figure out who I was and what my purpose in life was. And in doing so, I would find inspiration in the lives of others. But what stuck out to me the most were their stories. It was their stories that would be a source of guidance for me. Through their stories, I would find direction in my life. And I decided that it was these stories that needed to be brought to light. We needed more of these stories. And this is how Tell Your Story was born. Today's story is a very special one with an individual named Esraa Haider. Esraa is a marketing professional and social entrepreneur with an MBA in organizational behavior. But most of all, she is the founder of Mawadda Center in Lebanon. Join us as Esraa tells us about the unexpected twists and turns in her life that brought her to where she is today. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
I want you to tell your story because I think the whole focus of this whole thing is that we always start out somewhere and we have this vision for ourselves, and somewhere down the road, because of our journey and the experiences that we have, we end up somewhere completely different. So we're going to start from the beginning. Tell me about your childhood.
So I was born and raised here in Dallas, actually, in Denton. And I was raised here until the age of 9. We're Lebanese. So my parents wanted us to be within our family and within our community. And so at the age of 9, we went back home. And it was a wonderful, beautiful thing that we had the opportunity to experience both worlds, the West and all of its libraries and, opportunities. And at the same time, we had the privilege of being around our family and our loved ones, and growing up in our village it's where we're from. It's home. And, having both those worlds, reflecting now, looking back now, it really has a huge impact on your life, to the extent that you don't realize it then, of course, but only as you grow older, you think, I'm so blessed to have had both of these worlds. And that being said, it did not mean that it was easy. It's not all, like we had the best of both and that was the end of the story. There's much more to that story. And so to answer your question, our childhood was all over the place. It was full of culture and full of life and full of nature and full of a city, and it was beautiful. And I wish that childhood for everyone. And when I look back and I think about it, it's something that I'm very blessed to have had, and at the same time, it kind of set me on the path of where I am today.
Yeah. So when you you talk about your village a lot, I love hearing you say village because it just sounds so surreal. And I've actually seen pictures, and it's absolutely breathtaking. When you were going, because you were 9, you said, when you were in America, and you moved to Lebanon, what was your feeling then? Like, did you? Because 9 is, you're at that age where you're still young, but you're still old enough to understand, like, you're going through this whole change and you're leaving, the people that you've known for 9 years behind,
Mm.
the place, the school, everything that you've ever known for those 9 years of existence. You're leaving that behind I mean, at that time, that was almost a foreign country to you, right?
Yeah, it was. And it was an exciting thing for us. I clearly remember, like, the night of when the house was full of boxes and that was it. We were leaving. And it was a really exciting thing for us. But the shock for me was, when I got there, I didn't realize how much I would miss here, because I was under this impression, I was under this illusion that I'm going home. Like, I would have no attachment to this other place. Why would I? And I remember like, as soon as we arrived, like, being there and wanting to ride my bike, which was a very normal thing here.
Yeah.
You just get on your bike. And there it was sort of looked down upon, like, and I was a child, and I clearly have that memory because there were certain social norms, there were certain rules that I was not introduced to because I had not been part of that community. So it took us a while. It took, I mean, I'm pretty sure that each one of our siblings had a different experience, but I was the eldest. And so for me, it was just kind of trying to understand the rules of this new place while at the same time being ecstatic that I was there. And language was a huge barrier. We did speak Arabic, but our Arabic was not as good as the other kids. And at school, we were also treated as if we were, oh, so you're the ones that speak really good English versus, we were put into this box of, children who spoke really good English and that didn't speak really good Arabic. And, and I'm mentioning these little details of my story because they're important, and I'm sure that everyone can relate to the idea of being put in a certain box. And for a child to have to experience that, it makes you aware of others, it makes you more aware of yourself and your feelings. And to realize now that I'm talking about it, that these are kind of engraved, they're memories that stay with you, just show how impactful and important these little instances were. So this phase of transformation, of going from one place to another, one extreme to another, if I can say that, it not only does it change you, not only does it transform you, but it also allows you to realize that you're not confined to one space. You don't have to live in one world, and you have to set the rules for that. Even as a child, I wanted to ride that bike, and I rode that bike, and soon after, there were 3 or 4 other girls who were demanding to ride bikes. We went out of the phase, but the idea is that I knew that that was something that I wanted. And when I realized that this was not allowed or acceptable, I just did what I thought was right, what I thought my parents, of course, did not object to the idea. But again, it's not about the story of the bike. It's the story of you realizing that you're in this new place and you kind of have to figure your way around it and see where you fit in a way that works for you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though, because I kind of feel that same experience that in the beginning, when I used to go back to Pakistan, for example, just for a visit, it used to feel, even though that was home per se, like I was born in Pakistan, but I was 8 months old when I moved here. I feel like even though that was home, it wasn't, we were always outcasts. Like we didn't fit really well over there.
Yeah.
We didn't fit really well over here because we're so different from everyone over here. So it was really hard to kind of keep your feet in both places at once and feel accepted. And that feeling of acceptance and knowing which one was the environment that you wanted to really invest more of your effort into.
Yeah. And it's hard for you as a child, even as growing up, to realize these things, to comprehend them, understand them, and kind of make sense of them all. So it was a challenge. It was a challenge to kind of have to choose which world, which world is better for me. But at that time, we didn't have the choice. I mean, we were in Lebanon, and that was it. But still, there was this reminiscence, this dream, this idea of maybe one day we'd go back. But at times, I'd feel like kind of ashamed to confess to that idea, even to myself, because it was just a scary thought that I should dismiss, that I should be grateful, that you're back home. Why would you ever want to go back there? And it's just, these are just things that stay with you, and they don't necessarily have to be bad things.
When did you feel that, when was it that changed where you felt like Lebanon was finally home for you, that you really felt like you fit in and that's where you wanted to be?
It was when we had to leave again.
Oh no.
So fast forward, and I was in the 8th grade, and my family moved to Kuwait. And, by then you've developed true friendships. You've developed a connection to the village and the people in that village and to your family, extended family. And it was at that moment that you realized that I realized how the United States was out of the question. It was not even on my mind anymore at that stage. The village was everything, where I was from, my home, that was everything. And, the moment I lost it, the moment I was going to lose it was the moment I realized how beautiful and just how home felt like. But yeah, that was our life.
Yeah, they always say that you don't realize a good thing until it's gone, or like when it's been taken away from you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so true.
Tell me more about your village, because I think when everyone thinks of village, they think of this like underdeveloped little area. I know the village for Pakistan is like these little clay houses with like most of the house it's just the rooms that are covered. Everything else is like open air.
Yeah.
Like,
So I think
tell me about your village.
we need to kind of put things in context.
Yeah.
A little bit of a geography lesson for you. So Lebanon is a very small country. We're like a population of 5 million. Um, and yet there's so much difference and there's so much diversity in it. So you could be in the city, and then you could be at the beach, and an hour later you're skiing in the mountains. That's how geographically diverse it is.
Yeah.
So our village, our hometown, is not made of clay houses, made of regular houses. We do have electricity outages, so the electricity goes out not only in our village, in all of Lebanon.
Yeah.
But it's tucked away under this beautiful mountain, and everybody knows everybody's name. Everybody knows everybody. You get your groceries and your chicken and your meat from the local vegetable store and the local butcher, and there's peace. There's beauty and serenity, and there is something in it that is being lost today. And there is something in it that we could never have here in the United States. At least I've never experienced it here. I don't want to say that. But there's a community, there's, besides family, there's a community that care for one another, that fight with one another. End of the day, they still, they're still very proud of where they're from and what they've achieved and how they've built themselves. There's history and there's archaeology. There's so many beautiful things in it, and to be part of that is really a remarkable thing. So yeah, that's my village.
What was happiness for you at that point? Because I feel like it's very relative. Like when you were in that environment, happiness meant something completely different.
So happiness was basically going to the river, begging my mom to go to the river and just spend the day with my friends. It was a hike, so you'd have to hike, kind of go under the mountain, and you'd get all your food and your supplies and everything. And it was like a 30-minute hike to get there. But once you got there, you'd reach like this secret river that everybody in our hometown knows of, but it was a secret to only us. Like,
yeah,
villages heard about it, but they were not allowed to come in it just because we kind of claimed it as if it was our own.
Yeah.
Happiness was that, happiness was, just walking and eating cherries and, drinking water from the river and just being free and not having to worry. And we were children, and, happiness to us was us being together, surrounded by the trees and the sound of the trees and the mountain. And so I think nature played a really important role in my life, and I'm pretty sure it played an important role in the life of other children who were, my cousins and my friends. And because it's such a beautiful place, we were very connected. We grew everything. Our grandparents were farmers, and we, it was part of our life to see the honeybees and go to the honey keeper and taste the honey, and we get our own vegetables, and then we go see the cows and we check on the chickens, and but at the same time we had the internet, and we were going to the city and exploring. So we kind of, it's funny, in the same way that I had both worlds of, the United States and Lebanon, in the village itself, you also had both worlds. You had two worlds. You had that innocence of life, and at the same time, you had that busyness. You could access the busyness of the city whenever you wanted, but it was not infiltrated in the city, in the village yet.
Mm-hmm.
I only say it's infiltrated now, but back then it wasn't.
Yeah, it seems like they're very mindful, and it was all about the social atmosphere rather than the world that we have today, where it's taken over by media and
Well, thank goodness there was no social media then.
yeah.
But there was, for me, it was just something remarkable to witness this connection with the other, to witness a connection beyond your cousins and your extended family, to witness a connection to the farmer and to the local butcher. And you not only know their names, and you know their kids, and you know what fruits they like, because that's what they always buy when you see them at the vegetable store. And to have that sense of community created security for me. It created, not only did it bring me immense joy, but it also created a sense of security in terms of, you're safe here. We've got you, we've got your back. And to me, that is, I don't think you can get that on any social media platform.
When did you feel like your security was being snatched away from you?
So that's a tough question. I think my clearest memory of that was when I went to school, when I went to do my undergraduate studies. And as I told you, Lebanon is very diverse. And I think I was walking in a place, wasn't very, let's say, hijab friendly, if that's the right thing to say, or, the hijab was not very, they weren't accustomed to it in that specific area.
Uh-huh.
I think I just felt out of place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was in my head or if it was really a true sensation. Um, but I did feel that I was out of place, that I did not belong, and yet I was still in my country.
Mm-hmm.
A part of my country, I felt like I didn't belong. So that was one instance. And the university that I went to was called the American University of Beirut, and it's a very, very cultural, diverse place. I never sensed that there immediately. However, with time, um, my realization was that we were forming into groups. So, everyone that was similar to the other would form this kind of group. And that scared me. That scared me because it was not what I was used to, having been here and having that security of my community and my village. And then I was thrown into this diverse world where I started to question, what does it mean to be part of a community? Does it mean that you are only with the ones who are similar to you? When do you extend that hand? When do you go and say hello? And whose responsibility is it to do that? And so that was kind of, and at that point, I didn't really feel that my security or my safety, or I didn't feel very intimidated. It wasn't until I wanted to apply for a job and I was like actually told, you're going to have to change the way you look. And, talking about this right now, it seems very racist,
Yeah.
but it was very normal. It was very acceptable. You know, that language, very acceptable. And I believe it's still to a certain degree there. And that is truly when I felt that something's not right.
Yeah. What about the social nature of what was going on at that time? Because I know there was a lot of warfare and a lot going on where you lived.
Yeah, so I guess I missed the part where I should have mentioned that we lived, all of this beauty was during a time of war.
Yes, that's what I remember the most from your stories. And how
So,
you yeah, so
you
tell me
know,
about that.
so we actually grew up like, during a time of war, and we would go to school and we would hear the bombs, and it's just anyone can Google Lebanon and war, and they can see the images and they can know how devastating it is. No word, no explanation of what I will say will do it justice. So as I grew up, I lived one part. I lived a specific period of a war. And that lasted until the year 2000. So we would go to school and we'd see the bomb, we'd hear the bombs, and our school had a special rule that because our villages were from a specific area that was very vulnerable to bombing, we kind of had this extension where, if you need to be 30 minutes late, you can. And now that I think about it, it's like we kind of needed a little bit more than that.
Like we get more leeway for snow.
Yeah. And then the beauty of it was that the war ended in the year 2000, and we had the joy of celebrating. We had the joy of freedom, of reclaiming our land. We passed by a mountain every day at school, and we knew that that mountain was ours, but at the same time, it wasn't. The day after the war was over, everybody was on that mountain, to kind of touch it and feel it and sense that we were not defeated. And for you to grow up with this sense of love for your land, and this sense of pride, and this sense of wanting to be part of, this freedom, this liberation, even as a child, it connects you more. It makes you want that place more, and it makes you appreciate that place more. And then fast forward to when I was in college, and there was a second war. So, we were in class, and we were like literally telling the instructor, there's a war outside. Do you think we could kind of postpone this class? And he's like, no, we lived through the Civil War. We lived through this war. And, we are Lebanese. This is in our blood. And we went to class, but it only lasted a week, because after that, it was really dangerous. I don't know how much you'd want to know about the war and the impact that it has. I think that needs an entire different discussion. But overall, if you're someone who's been through that, who's seen, you've seen destruction, imagine if there's a place that you went to all the time, and then with a blink of an eye, it was gone. It was into ashes. And that brings feelings of anger and rage and not understanding. And it also brings feelings of wanting to do more, feelings of wanting to overcome, and the feeling of wanting to fight, and not to fight physically, but to fight in your thoughts, in your words, in your education, to fight in whatever power you had. And to me, at that time, I was at the dorms, and everybody had left because American University, so the American ships came, and they told everybody, if you want to leave, you can leave, but you can only take one bag. So everybody there would come knocking at my room, and they're like, we're leaving, and we have all this stuff. Do you want it? And I'm like, yes, I want it. And I know exactly what I'm going to do with it. So I ended up spending the war making packages for refugees with all the stuff that all these girls have brought me. And I would just, organize them into baby clothes, or because some of them were visiting and they brought gifts for their families and stuff. And so, women's clothes, makeup, shampoo, you name it, everything that you can imagine a person has in their life. And the war ended, and, where do you think was the first place I wanted to be in? My village.
Yeah.
And I went back, and there was still a smell of, sulfur and bombs, but it was a beautiful, beautiful smell because it meant that we were back.
Amazing. How was it for your family? Because I can only imagine if my child was going to school, and there was bombs outside our door, and there's this warfare. I mean, I feel like when you're older, maybe there's a sense of, okay, they're a little more independent, they can make their own decisions. But when you're so young,
Yeah.
what's going through your mom or your dad's mind? Like,
So
is it?
they were in one place and I was another. So I was taking a summer course and they were in the village and I was in the city in Beirut.
Mhm.
And they had to flee because our village was, it was a risky place to be in. And they had to flee to go back to Kuwait, which was where we were living. And I could not join them. They could not come and get me. And to them, the best decision was that I should stay where I was because that was the safest place. But to answer your question, my mom just couldn't take it. She wanted me to find a way. She wanted me to be back home. And I think she just couldn't bear the thought that she had, not tried hard enough. Or I know that they would have come get me if it was something that was even possible, but it was not.
Mhm.
Um, and so she would call and beg, and my dad would call, and it was like, and they arranged everything. They arranged, so I think it was the 25th day of the war, and they wanted me to come to Kuwait, so they had arranged for an uncle to come and take me. And long story short, I made it back to Kuwait with turmoils and having to go to the airport by myself and having to find a ticket and being alone. I was 17, and so it was a very, very scary thing. But Allah blessed that trip, and Allah kept us safe. And our prayers were all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to keep us and everyone safe. And I made it back home, and it might seem simple to say it right now. I made it back home, but it was not that easy.
Would you say that's probably the hardest moment in your life?
The hardest moment in my life that was definitely one of the hardest moment in my life was not specifically that. The hardest moment in my life was the day that I found out that they were going to leave. The night that I found out that they were going to leave and I was going to stay. And that night I was alone. So you're sleeping through a war in a dorm room of like 400 rooms where you are the only person, you and maybe two other people in that entire building. And I did not sleep because of fear for them, of the journey that they had to make, because it was not a guaranteed journey, and the fear that I would be alone for the rest of my life and that I would lose them. um to me, that was the hardest moment of my life. That night was the hardest moment of my life because I didn't know whether I was going to see them again or not. I didn't know if I was going to be awake. You would sleep not knowing if you were going to wake up. You would sleep not knowing if you would have rubble all over you the next morning, even though there was this guarantee that you were in an American institution, that you're going to be safe. But still, what you were seeing on TV, what you were seeing with your bare eyes, it spoke a different story. So to me, that was the most difficult night of my life, part of my life for now.
SubhanAllah. I mean, I think just that whole hardship, I think, really shapes who you are today. And I think it's the people that have seen hardship and have overcome like the hardest points of their life. It seems like they're unstoppable. And I think that's what I see in you. I see that nothing can stop you, and clearly this is why, because you've seen the worst, you've seen pretty bad stuff, and you've overcame it.
Yeah, but it's still, in comparison to what others in my community have seen, it seems so little. It seems like sometimes I'm ashamed to kind of tell this story because compared to what they went through, it seems like nothing. but to me, it was a lot, to the person who I was then, it was a lot. And so that's why that story is worth telling.
Yeah. What was your happiest moment?
You mean in life in general?
Life in general, yes.
Or you mean in the war? Like,
I think just life in general. What was your
life
happiest?
in general, honestly, to be honest, the happiest day of my life, number one, was my graduation day.
Yeah. What did
Um,
that mean to you?
it meant so many things. My dad and my mom did not go to school. And my father worked really, really, really hard. And my mother sacrificed a lot of things for us to be where we are. And I wanted to do it for them. I really wanted to do it for them first and then to do it for me. And I'm not ashamed to say that. And it was a moment full of so much joy to see their faces, for them to be with me and to witness my graduation. It was an immense moment of joy, of accomplishment, of them seeing the fruit of their 30 years of labor and their 30 years of sacrifice. And for them to acknowledge that and to say that and to be as excited as I was, to me, that was a the happiest moment. The second happiest moment, I must say, was when I met my husband. And that memory, that first moment, I've made it into the happiest memory now because of what we've become. But to me, that image of the first time I met him and the first time he spoke to me, um, long before we were, even getting to know each other, there was joy. There was this inner peace in that moment that I treasure forever. And of course, the birth of my children.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I need to. I think every human being can relate to that. So I don't think I need to dwell on that. And it's very personal for everyone, and everyone has their own, how motherhood changes them and parenthood changes them. So, and I think it's a very personal thing. But yeah, those would be the top three. If I'd had to say one more, it would be launching the Kids Center, launching Mawadda Kids Center, and taking the step to do that.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. I'm so excited to talk about that. But first,
Before,
I want to kind of pause this moment. You graduated. You've accomplished so much. What was your dream? Like, where did you see yourself? What was your vision in that Esraa?
oh my goodness, the vision was a very corporate suit, handbag, 8 to 5, work, corporate ladder kind of image. And I wanted it more than anything because it was so hard to get as a woman who observed the hijab, as a Muslim woman, and this may seem difficult for some to grasp. Lebanon does have a lot of Muslims, and why would that be an issue? But it is an issue. So that is kind of what I wanted to be, this marketing executive. I wanted to design billboards and ads, and, I wanted to sell things and, and I did all of that. I did, I did achieve all of that. Um, but, the truth comes after the but. Uh, it never felt enough. It always felt like there was this silent calling that was kind of being silenced with the pursuit, with the goal of achieving what I thought back then was what I really wanted. And at that moment, I was very happy. I was very, during those years, I was very happy. But there was kind of this little sound in the back of your head that was kind of saying something else. And when I graduated undergrad, I applied to do psychology. I had this hunch in me that I enjoyed in my undergrad years, the courses that I enjoyed the most were about Homer and Gilgamesh and, the Odyssey of Homer, and just really history and civilization and the human and anthropology. These were things that really, really interested me. And I, after school, I thought, I would be so cool if I could do a degree in psychology. And so I applied and I got accepted. And my parents at that time thought, you'd be in a better position with an MBA. An MBA would give you so much more in your career. It'll secure, certain things. And that was what I did. Got my MBA, and and again, I don't regret any of that. But I do kind of caution myself now more to listen to that little voice. I listen to it now much more strongly than before.
When did you feel like that little voice finally kind of came out? Because, like you said before, it wasn't really like there was a little voice, but it was being silenced. When was it that you felt like you could start hearing it now?
So it was silenced for a really long time. So again, what happened was that when we got married, my husband came to the United States, and luck would have it that he would get a job in Dallas. Coincidence. It was not, it was not our doing. It was Allah's doing that we would come back here. And so fast forward, after I built my career and everything, I had to leave all of that. I had to put all of that away. And I had to, everything that I have done, my teaching, my clients, my business, the people that I knew, my connections, the network that I made, all of that was kind of, I had to make a choice. Did I want to be with my husband and raise my daughter and raise our family together? Or did I want to live a life where I still had my career, but did not have a family? And the choice was quite obvious. Coming back to the United States, I came back with such high hopes and such dreams, and, of just, I'm coming back to this beautiful place that could offer me something that Lebanon could never offer me, which was opportunities and education. And, I thought, I'd come to the US and I'd do a PhD in business, and, that was the plan, and I still kind of held on to that plan. And then I became a mother who was devoted to her daughter and did nothing else. And that scared me so much. It terrified me because I always defined myself by my career. That was my definition. And it took me 4 years to kind of talk myself out of that limited belief, to talk myself out of that idea. And I would tell myself, you were never defined by your career, and you are no longer defined by your career, and you will never be defined by your career. That is not what defines you. That is part of who you are. That is part of who you were, but it does not define you. And so, going back to your question, I think it's important, to talk about the struggle of coming back, of losing everything, of, losing my identity, losing who I was and who I believed I was, and then trying to kind of put the pieces back together. I was like, really, like, who am I? If I'm not a marketing professor and I'm not a marketing consultant and I'm not making this much amount of money, then who am I? And I'm so grateful for those 4 years of agony, of self-discovery, because they allowed me to hear that voice again, that voice that had, silenced. That voice came back. It was only when I was silenced, not silenced, it was only when I was able to become quiet within myself that I kind of started to hear that voice again. And to me, that voice was a calling. It was a passion. It was an intention, it was a direction, it was guidance. And I started listening to that voice, and I would just journal and write and, put all my ideas into paper, even if they didn't make sense at that time.
What kind of things did you have to do? Because, that self-discovery, there's something that kind of sparks it, right? Like there's
Yeah.
something that brings that change. Where did this all come from? What was the source of it?
So libraries were the source of it. I would just go and look for interesting titles. I would Google what are the New York Times top books, and I just pick ones that would relate to me, things that interested me. And it was from there, it was through reading and through, I don't think it was the act of reading itself as much as it was the act of slowing down and the act of not having to worry. There's a beauty in being in an isolated space. So the story is that I was in a community, and to put things into perspective, I was now in a bubble of my own, where we knew very little people, where we had very little social obligations. So all I had was me, my husband, and my daughter. And I had a lot of time to be with myself, to kind of think and write and read and walk. And so books opened up this huge world of ideas and possibilities and, and opportunities and hope. And I kind of, held on to that, even though I didn't know what I wanted. It was not clear. I was lost. I didn't know if I wanted to do a PhD. And then I said, okay, yeah, I'll do a PhD. And I applied and I got rejected. And then I said, oh, I'll apply for a job. And then I applied for a job and I realized that it would take me away from my daughter. And, all of these little failures, so to speak, all of these disappointments allowed me to even dig deeper into who I was and what I wanted to do.
So it was the failures, right? Like the failures really help find yourself. I think we overlook the failures. We see them as this point in our life where everything is falling apart, but these failures are actually these beautiful learning moments.
They are, and of course you don't see it as that at that moment.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that we remind ourselves of every single failure in that moment, that we remind ourselves of failures and the importance of failures and the doors that they open. And it's a cliche that everybody says, but it's not a cliche if it's true, if it is so true, and the thing that I have, the thing that I have in my office right in front of me is that rejection letter, that reminder that you once thought that you wanted to seek this. Allah also, Allah plans and he's the best of planners. You plan and Allah plans and he is the best of planners. And to keep that in mind, that is what I would tell to myself. That is what I would remind myself, that everything that I did it with 100%, and everything else was up to him. That rejection was for a reason. That job not being a perfect fit for me was a reason. Me coming to the United States and leaving everything behind was for a reason. And I think you just have to be hopeful in those darkest moments that, that this will pass and that good will come out of it.
That brings a lot of hope because I think that's something that we all face, and we never know that time limit, because you said for you it was 4 years. Sometimes we think like, what if it's our lifetime? Like, what if it's just year after year and we still don't have that self-discovery? We don't find that thing that we're looking for.
Well, here's the thing, there's this whole, I have a dilemma with the issue of passion and the issue of finding your calling, is that number one, it's not something that simply comes to you. That is a very important thing to keep in mind. You have to work, you have to put in the effort to find it. So I think the first thing that worked for me, that I'm confident would work for everyone else, that I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I would ask him, show me what it is that I have to do. even if it's a very small thing. I was not seeking something grand. I was seeking self-fulfillment, something that would, bring me that inner peace and joy, and knowing that I was doing the best that I could. And so finding your passion does require that you put in the work, that you do that self-discovery, that you read and you write and you ask and you go out of your comfort zone, and you don't simply sit and wait. It will not happen. And the other misconception that a lot of people have about finding your passion is that it's okay if you have a lot of passions, because I had this belief that Esraa could only be one thing. You can only be a social media, a marketing consultant. You cannot be more than that. That is what you studied at school, and that is what you're supposed to be. But what if it wasn't? What if I did enjoy anthropology and history and business and art and so many other things? And it's okay if I wanted to be good at all of them. It's okay if I wanted to pursue all of them at the same time. It doesn't mean I'm crazy. It doesn't mean I'm, over ambitious. It doesn't mean anything. So to keep that in mind is that you allow yourself, listen to yourself when you enjoy making something, and you say, hey, I kind of enjoyed that, and I might want to do that again. That's something I kind of want to learn more about. That's a sign. Sometimes we're so in a hurry that we don't pay attention to all these signs that are, coming to our way. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. And to also, the third thing is to realize, which is something that you brought up about the time limit, is trying to rid ourselves of that burden of time. Like, is it going to come now? Is it going to come now? Like, when is it going to arrive? Is it coming today, tomorrow, in a year? I think if we just live our lives to the best way that we're capable of, and given the circumstances that we have, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we put in that work, that passion, that thing, that joy that you're looking for will come your way.
When did you find your joy? When was the sparks that you were getting? When did it finally ignite into a flame and Esraa found what she was searching for all along?
So it was 2.5 years ago. And I hadn't been to Lebanon in 1.5 years. And by then I had a daughter and a son, and I had experienced America as a mother, and I had experienced America from the perspective of someone who had opportunities to go to a library. And this might seem foreign to a lot of people, but for growing up in Lebanon, you don't have libraries, you don't have museums. Nature was your museum. And so I had experienced this beautiful approach to motherhood that I created, that I chose. I said to myself, I'm in this country that has so much to give, and I want to make best use of that with my children. I want to give them, take them to every library and every story time, and take them to these museums. I wanted them to experience that. But at the same time, there was that voice there was this idea that was kind of in my head, and it goes back to my community. And I was thinking, I'm so blessed to be living here right now and to be doing all these amazing things with my kids. But early on, all I could think about was the other kids, the kids in my village. Those were my concern, specifically my niece and my nephew. And all the idea was that, what if they could have what my kids have? And that kind of transformed into this idea of social inequality, this idea of, why should we have this and they not have what we have, in terms of play, in terms of opportunities, in terms of education, in terms of books. And that kind of sparked something in me. It drove me crazy. That idea drove me crazy. This discrepancy between us. I was going back home. So I decided, to fill every single bag that I was taking with toys and books. And I decided at that, you know, in those months leading up to our departure from here, that I was going to build something. I was going to create a space. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I wanted to have this huge room and create like this little mini museum with the best toys, with the best books, with the best opportunities for these kids. And I just wanted kids to come, spend a couple of hours, have fun, you know, and enjoy themselves and learn something new while having fun. And I wanted that space to be part of my village. I wanted it to be part of my community. I wanted to do it for them. And that's what I did. You know, I went back home and I said to my parents and I said to my sister, you know, this is what I want. This is what I have to do. And it's just this burning sensation of joy and anger and excitement and drive. And, you know, a quick hint for you to know whether this is something that you should be pursuing or not is whether or not it keeps you up at night in a good way. You know, if this is something that you just want to know more about and you just can't stop thinking about it and it just, you know, drives you crazy, then that's a pretty good sign. And so what happened was that my parents offered us a space, offered me and my sister. My sister was kind of, you know, the second brain of the operation, and she and my parents offered us the space in their home that they weren't using. It's this beautiful big space and it has, you know, a lot of potential for, you know, it has a capacity for, you know, for a lot of children. And so we got to work, you know, we put the tables, we set out the toys, and we put the books, and, you know, and I prayed to Allah that this would be good, that this would bring good, that everything that I hoped for would happen. If not then, if not in that summer, that it would be the beginning of something. And we launched Mawadda Kids Center in 2017, and we're a play space and a library. We're a summer program we're a summer space for children ages 3 to 9, and they come to our space and they choose a variety of activities in art and architecture and music and books and design and, you know, you name it, and Play-Doh and all the fun things, but at the same time, things that were good for them. And and at the first, we were small, and you know, not a lot of people knew about us. And alhamdulillah, we've grown, and this is we're getting ready for our third year. So yeah, that's kind of a quick summary of how I listened to that voice, and I allowed it to be. I allowed it to come out, and I took action.
How did you know this was exactly what your calling was? Because I think sometimes, I mean, I know I've made this mistake a lot. I know other people probably have too, where you feel like this was your calling and you follow
Yeah.
it, but then it's not there. Like, what gave you that sign that this is exactly what you were supposed to do?
Um, I just think the reaction that we got, what I witnessed in my village, what I witnessed in my community was validation that this was what I had to do. The response of the children, the the laughter, the opportunities that I think they witnessed, I took a step forward. I mean, I took a step backward, sorry. And I looked and I gazed. I remember the first day that we opened, and I just looked at what was happening in front of my eyes. And I saw so much hope. And I saw so much things that we have missed. I saw so many things that these kids have not had. And I felt that I was destined to come here and to kind of build something. It's not even an organization yet. I hope it will be one day. But just, you know, just standing and looking at these kids and their parents and listening to what these parents had to say, And then the growth that we had the next year, and you know, the excitement and the enthusiasm. And it wasn't only about playing, it wasn't only about having fun. It was much more than that. It was about connecting with kids and bringing up this idea that kids deserve to have a space. Kids deserve to have opportunities to play and explore. And to think that I was doing that, to think that I and my team were doing that, the responsibility that came with that was so huge and so immense that I knew there was just it was just this instinct. It was this feeling, this gut feeling inside that whispered and told me, this is what you have to do. This is what you are meant to do. Even if this is, this doesn't necessarily have to be that what you're meant to do for the rest of your life. This is what you're meant to do for this chapter of your life. And I embraced that. And so, and the joy that came from it, immense, immense, and the joy that I had never felt in the corporate world, the joy that wanted me to do more, that peace, feeling of exhaustion, but sleeping at night and saying, I want to do this again tomorrow, and wishing to do this more and more and more and more. All of these were signals for me that this is what I was meant to do.
Do you think that if you hadn't gone through the experiences that you did throughout your life, do you think Mawadda Center would be existing right now, or do you think it has to do with your experiences?
Yeah, I don't think it would exist if it hadn't been for this combination of worlds, for this this constant culture shocks and constant culture realizations and lessons. It allowed me, all of these allowed me to, number one, have a sense of connection, immense connection, that not necessarily everybody has. You can be part of a village, but you don't always have to feel. I feel responsible for the kids in my village for some reason. I feel responsible. I feel like I have something that I should offer them. But that, being part of that village brought me back to them. And, it kind of shaked me, and it kind of made me think, you are not alone on this earth. Your problems are not your only problems. And to us to think that we're isolated is, I can't comprehend that. I saw an opportunity to change. I saw an opportunity for change, and I knew that I had to seize it. If not me, then who? And everything worked in my favor, not out of luck, but because of these experiences. These experiences kind of gave me these glasses that allowed me to see beyond myself. These experiences allowed me to make that realization and to develop the ambition of going out of my comfort zone. Because every time I would stumble, every time I would fail, I would say to myself, well, remember the war? You came out of that. So if you came out of that, you can you can build a small play space. You can do that, And self-doubt is a scary thing. Self-doubt is something that we should all be cautious of, because it can go badly, if you're not confident, if you don't have these protective layers. To me, the protective layers were these experiences. They were my walls that secured that ambition. They were my walls that secured that belief, that hope that some people might lose along the way and then gain back. I just held on to that hope for as tight as I could, even in the darkest moments, knowing that something good was going to happen. I just had to wait for it and work for it.
I think as an outsider, it's seeing your story unfold. It's quite an eye opener, because you start off as this little girl in America, in Dallas, and then you have this feeling of like you don't want to leave your country. Then you go to Lebanon, and then from Lebanon you don't want to. You're coming back to America, and you don't want to leave Lebanon now, and you're like in both these worlds, but I feel like you said, it was these experiences that really kind of brought you to where you are today. Because if you hadn't lived your life in Lebanon and you hadn't dealt with all those dire circumstances, you wouldn't have appreciated the life that you had in America, the things that you didn't have access to in Lebanon. You wouldn't have appreciated them, and then had that thought process that this is something you want back in Lebanon, like you wanted to create something bigger. And I feel like if you hadn't gone back, and I know from our talk, you were talking about how it was really difficult for you to leave Lebanon after that, after you got married and you had kids, especially when your family was, so close knit over there. But I think it was like Allah's way of like, this is not your journey. This is just a tool to get you
Yeah.
to where you are today.
Yeah, it was. It really was. And I think it's so important that we tell our stories, we tell them not because of the mere fact that everybody needs to tell their story. But, I think when we tell our stories, it not only allows us to connect with one another, which is what storytelling does, but it gives us this powerful tool of reflecting on ourselves. That's something that we kind of tend to forget to do. And when you tell your story and you're able to connect with someone else, I think there's power in that. I think there's beauty in that. And I think that the story of our center, my hope for it is that that story inspires change, that story inspires transformation. And we tell that story. We tell the story of the struggle of starting up and the struggle of convincing people to come. You're convincing people to come and play with their kids. How would that be? And apparently it's very hard.
Yeah.
We tell these stories because there are lessons in them, lessons for us, lessons for others. And, you know, storytelling is a very powerful tool, but we need to be cautious in making sure that the stories that we tell are stories that matter, are stories that are important, especially in this age of social media where the stories that we see are of what people eat and what they drink and where they go and what they do. These are not the stories that we should be telling. The stories that we should be telling are stories of change. They don't have to be war stories. They don't have to be glamorous stories or stories about these amazing organizations. I think we need to look for the hidden stories, the stories that are not being told. Those are the stories that we need to look for. Those are the stories that we need to tell. And they're there, they're in our sisters and our brothers and our mothers. If you think about your mother's journey, if I think about my mother's journey, my father's journey, there's so much in there. But are we telling those stories? Are we remembering those stories? I don't know. And we have a responsibility. I have a responsibility. If I have a voice and I have access to the internet and I have, access to books and pens and a video camera, I feel like, that is something that we should all strive to do. And we're all storytellers in our own little way.
Absolutely. I think you completely just hit hit the ball on the nose, hit the nose on the ball. I feel like that you definitely just pinpointed what this whole process is for me. I feel like this is exactly what I want. I mean, I feel like just even in your story, there's so many um, trials and tribulations that you've gone through that obviously it's not the same that I've gone through, but I find similarities in it, and I find a relation in it, and I can reflect on those, and I feel like it's just so inspirational just to listen to what you've overcome, because sometimes your hardest moment that you've already passed could be a current moment for somebody else that they're going through, and maybe it's your story that can help bring change.
Yeah, I hope so. I really do. And I think everyone I mean, and I applaud you for your initiative and to tell stories and to share these stories on social media, where we need more of these stories. So I think it's so important that we fight back, this narrative of that's not important. I don't have time for that. Or, this dismissal of ideas and this dismissal of the other. It's not who we are as Muslims. It's not who we are as dignified human beings. And I think you should keep telling those stories, Cosmo. I think you should use this platform in the way that you are and the effort that you put in to share not only my story. I am one of many. Look for those stories, I guess. Look for those hidden, untold stories and tell them, because you do it so well.
Well, thank you. And I think it's interesting because we've had this conversation, and you know how this whole video and podcast series kind of started off as something else, and then one thing led to another, and now it's something completely different. And it's
It's unfolding. Yeah.
It's very humbling. It's like you have to go through the hard parts in your lives to appreciate the good parts, to appreciate what it is that you're doing now, because without those hard parts, this means nothing to you,
Yeah. And, having this conversation with you today, you kind of made me revisit the hard parts that I had forgotten, and I think that's an important thing to do. I think every once in a while, when things are good, when treating you well, you kind of have to revisit those difficult moments, even if it's just to reflect on and kind of try to see yourself, try to see how you acted, how you reacted, how you approached that difficult situation. And there are lessons in that, and lessons that we forget about ourselves. And we forget how strong we are. We forget how, resilient we are. And we kind of criticize ourselves and, doubt ourselves. I think it's important to kind of revisit these. Like, I just revisited the war, both of them. And there's just something inside you that's stirred up. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a good feeling. It's not a bad one.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Question for you. What is happiness for you today?
Oh, that's a difficult question.
That's why it's the last one.
Well, happiness to me today is pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And happiness to me is my parents' balcony and all of us together, with my husband, my children, and my siblings and my parents. And I know that Ramadan is coming. I just kind of I can't limit it to only that amount of people. I just imagine all of my village with like these lights and just drinking tea, and the wind is just passing by, and you have this chill, but you're warm inside because they're all there and they all love you, and you feel that you've done your part, in the best way that you have. At least that's kind of how I feel right now, alhamdulillah, to a certain extent, or at least I feel like I'm getting there. So happiness to me is being with them. Happiness to me is silence, and happiness to me is just, it's not fast paced. I can tell you that. And happiness to me is not a life portrayed on social media. And happiness to me is growing that center and these kids, not only the kids of my village, but every single child in Lebanon, including mine, the best books, the best education, the best curriculums, the best ideas. Happiness to me is being able to do that. That is one part of happiness to me. And again, being with them and seeing them and, hearing their chatter and their voices. And yeah, that would be happiness.
I feel like I'm there with you.
Are you drinking the tea?
I'm drinking the tea. Your tea is amazing. Alhamdulillah, subhanAllah, like just your journey and the way that you've described it. It was I feel like I was on that little roller coaster with you, and I found the end and that composure, and it was beautiful. Thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing.
I'm humbled to have been able to tell my story, and thank you so much for considering me. And I hope that my story, that it lights something up in you, whoever's watching, that it takes you to the places that you need to go, and that it brings you the peace and joy and the anger, the good anger that makes you do things, and that just it inspires you, even if it's in the smallest things. So I hope I was able to do that.
I think you will, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah.